In the shadows of ancient history, there are names that ignite curiosity: Lemuria, Atlantis, and Helena Blavatsky. For some, these are myths, symbols of lost worlds and spiritual fantasies. But for others, seekers, mystics, and philosophers, they represent hidden chapters in the story of humanity, chapters deliberately erased, censored, or forgotten. According to Blavatsky, these civilizations weren't legends. They were real, not just real, but foundational to who we are today. In her controversial work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky outlines a timeline of Earth's spiritual evolution that goes far beyond what science and history are willing to accept. She spoke of root races, stages of human development, not merely physical but metaphysical, beings with different bodies, consciousness, and even laws of nature. And at the heart of her cosmology were two vanished continents: Lemuria, the home of the third root race, tall, androgynous, intuitive beings who communicated telepathically, and Atlantis, the fourth root race, brilliant and powerful, but tragically consumed by ego and technology. Were these real civilizations? Or metaphysical archetypes? Or both? This is not just a story about lost continents. It's a story about where we came from, where we're going, and what we may have forgotten along the way. Because in Blavatsky's forbidden history, we are not the first great civilization. We are the fifth, and the sixth may already be awakening. To understand Lemuria and Atlantis in Blavatsky's teachings, we must begin with a deeper idea. Humanity is not a linear evolution, but a spiral, unfolding through vast cycles of time, each marked by a root race. In her view, Earth is not hosting its first form of intelligent life. Far from it. The first root race, Blavatsky claimed, was ethereal, not bound by flesh, but luminous and formless. These beings didn't die or reproduce in ways we understand. They simply existed as divine sparks, pure consciousness emerging from cosmic origins. The second root race was more tangible, though still fluid and dreamlike. Known as the Hyperboreans, they inhabited a now lost northern land. Their fall was not moral, but material, a descent from spiritual light into denser forms. Then came the third root race, the Lemurians. This was when humanity first began to take on physical form. Towering beings, some stories say over 12 feet tall, with dark leathery skin and androgynous qualities. They reproduced by splitting, a strange echo of biological myths found across ancient cultures. But Lemuria was more than biology. It was a civilization that lived in deep harmony with nature and the stars. Its people understood the inner energies of the earth, the movements of the cosmos, and the sacred rhythm of life. They had no written language. They didn't need one. They communicated in images, in vibration, in thought. And then, something shifted. Blavatsky suggests that the Lemurians began to fall, not because of war or disease, but because of desire. Desire for individuality, desire to separate, to dominate. To know themselves not as part of the whole, but as selves. And that desire, so familiar to us now, marked the beginning of the fourth root race, the Atlanteans. While Lemuria sank, literally and symbolically, Atlantis rose. Where Lemuria was guided by spiritual instinct and cosmic unity, Atlantis was marked by brilliance. Atlanteans developed intellect, technology, architecture, and language. They harnessed the forces of the earth, not just electricity, but energies we no longer understand. They built cities of crystal and light. They mapped the stars. They explored genetic experimentation, sound frequencies, and energy grids that supposedly stretched across the planet. Blavatsky describes Atlantis not as a utopia, but as a place of extremes. Great wisdom and great pride, enormous spiritual gifts, and terrible corruption. Some of its priest-kings maintained balance. Others sought godlike control. It was here that humanity, in its fourth iteration, flirted with its own destruction, and eventually, it succeeded. Not all Atlanteans perished in the cataclysm. According to esoteric tradition, survivors scattered across the world, bringing with them fragments of lost knowledge. Egypt, Mesoamerica, India, even Tibet. And thus began the fifth race, us. We, the fifth root race, known in Blavatsky's doctrine as the Aryans, a term she used spiritually, not racially, inherited a world of ruins, mystery, and echoes of power we could no longer explain. And here's where her teachings become even more unsettling, because if we are not the pinnacle of human evolution, but only one phase, what comes next? According to her writings, the sixth root race is already forming, not in cities or politics, but in consciousness. A new kind of human, one that blends intellect with intuition, science with spirit. They will not be defined by nationality or language. They will communicate through thought, perceive the invisible, and live in harmony with planetary forces long forgotten. But we're not there yet. In fact, Blavatsky warned, we're still carrying the karma of Atlantis. She believed that many of today's global crises, environmental destruction, obsession with power, materialism, are echoes of that old Atlantean fall. We are reliving the same story, hoping this time we choose differently. And what about Lemuria? What of the third race? Blavatsky claimed their legacy lives on too, in deep earth memories, in myths of giants, in subtle genetic lines, and in the magnetic fields of places like Easter Island, Madagascar, and parts of the Pacific. Lemuria may be gone, but not forgotten. Mainstream science, of course, rejects all of this. There is no physical evidence of Lemuria or Atlantis that satisfies the rigor of academia. The idea of root races is considered pseudoscience, even dangerous by some due to misinterpretations and misuses of Blavatsky's terminology. And yet, echoes remain. Ancient maps, like those of Piri Reis, depict landmasses where there should be ocean. Mythologies across Polynesia, India, and South America speak of lost lands swallowed by the sea. Even modern genetic studies reveal migrations and cultural similarities between peoples supposedly unconnected. But for Blavatsky, the most important evidence wasn't in bones or stone. It was in consciousness. She taught that true knowledge is held in the Akashic records, an invisible library of thought, memory, and soul that every human can access through deep meditation and spiritual discipline. In dreams, in déjà vu, in visions, we may be remembering not only our own past, but the journey of our species across thousands of lifetimes. So when you feel drawn to the ocean, to stars, to languages you've never studied, maybe you're not just curious. Maybe you're remembering. And maybe, just maybe, Lemuria and Atlantis aren't behind us, but within us. Blavatsky didn't invent these stories. She claimed to have received them, not through imagination, but through the masters. These mysterious figures, known as the Mahatmas or Ascended Masters, were said to be spiritually advanced beings who guided humanity's evolution from behind the scenes. According to Blavatsky, she was taught by two in particular, Master Morya and Master Kuthumi, who transmitted ancient truths directly to her during her time in Tibet and India. They told her about the cycles of time, the root races, and the secret history buried beneath our surface reality. To many this sounds like delusion, but to others, theosophists, mystics, even philosophers like Rudolf Steiner and Carl Jung, it hinted at something deeper, a collective memory, a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. Why do flood myths appear in over 200 cultures? Why do pyramids, megaliths, and cosmic alignments appear across continents that never met? What if the real secret of Lemuria and Atlantis is not about geography, but about memory, about who we were and what we might become again? One of the most haunting aspects of Blavatsky's teaching is her warning. She didn't share these histories just to dazzle or mystify. She believed humanity was at risk of repeating the same fatal errors: pride, technological obsession, spiritual disconnect. She saw Atlantis not as a tragedy of fate, but of choice, a civilization that rose to heights unimaginable and collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Sound familiar? The weapons we build, the systems we worship, the detachment from nature, all echoes of the fourth root race. And she believed we were being tested. Again. She wrote, "The cycles repeat, but the soul remembers. That which is not healed returns. That which is remembered transforms." In other words, we are living at the crossroads. To remember Lemuria is to remember innocence, unity, connection to the earth. To remember Atlantis is to remember power, mastery, and the dangers of imbalance. To remember them both is to reclaim our full story, and maybe, just maybe, to avoid another fall. Theosophy, as Blavatsky conceived it, is not a religion. It's a synthesis, a bridge between science, spirituality, and philosophy, pulling threads from Hinduism, Buddhism, Gnosticism, and Hermeticism. Its goal is not to convert, but to awaken. And the story of the root races is not meant to divide us into superior and inferior types, though it has sadly been misused that way, but to remind us that we are becoming something greater. Each race, she taught, was a lesson. The first, the purity of origin. The second, the innocence of cosmic connection. The third, the first fall into material life. The fourth, the rise and collapse of mental power. The fifth, the age of choice, our age. The sixth and seventh, still forming, still waiting, and they will be born not through conquest, but through consciousness. So perhaps the question is not whether Lemuria or Atlantis really existed, but whether we are ready to carry their memory with wisdom, instead of repeating their mistakes. Modern spiritual thinkers have built upon Blavatsky's ideas in surprising ways. Rudolf Steiner, for example, expanded on the root races with his own clairvoyant insights, describing even deeper stages of human evolution. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, gave hundreds of readings about Atlantis and the souls who reincarnated to resolve ancient karma. Even Carl Jung, though more cautious, explored collective unconscious symbols that align uncannily with Blavatsky's stages, archetypes of descent and return, fall and redemption. So why are these ideas returning now? Why is there a growing hunger for ancient maps, star ancestors, and forgotten wisdom? Maybe because we're ready to remember. Because deep down, we sense we've been here before. That the tools we wield, AI, genetic editing, quantum energy, are not new, just rediscovered. And the challenge isn't technological, it's spiritual. Can we evolve without destroying? Can we lead without dominating? Can we rise without falling? Some say Lemuria was in the Pacific, others place it in the Indian Ocean. Atlantis, they argue, was in the Atlantic or Antarctica, or under the Sahara. But in Blavatsky's cosmology, the location is less important than the lesson. The Earth itself is alive, breathing, shifting, transforming. Civilizations come and go, continents rise and sink. But the soul of humanity remains, learning, forgetting, remembering. We are not the first dreamers. We are not the first scientists. We are not the first to think we are the last. Blavatsky's forbidden history is dangerous not because it's wrong, but because it asks us to remember too much, to remember what it feels like to fall, and what it might take to rise again. In the final chapters of The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky turns to the future. She speaks of a time when humanity will awaken to its inner nature, when the veil between spirit and matter will thin, and new senses will emerge. She doesn't name it a utopia. She calls it a restoration, a return to balance, but only if we are ready. Not all will choose the higher path. Some will cling to control, to fear, to power, but others, perhaps you, perhaps many, will feel something stir, a memory, a knowing, a voice that whispers, "You've walked this path before." And this time, you don't have to fall. So what do we do with all of this? Are we supposed to believe every word Blavatsky wrote? No. But perhaps we're meant to feel something awaken. Not blind belief, but deep remembrance. A sense that the stories we've been told are incomplete. That our origin is older, our destiny greater. And maybe, as we look to the stars, explore the seas, and unlock the quantum realms of mind and matter. We are finally circling back to the knowledge Lemuria once held in silence, and Atlantis once tried to control. The question is no longer, did they exist? The question is, what will we do if they did? Perhaps Lemuria and Atlantis were not just places but mirrors, reflecting who we have been and who we could become. Helena Blavatsky was not asking us to believe in fantasy. She was asking us to remember, to look inward, to listen beyond noise, and to see the grand cycle of humanity not as a straight line but as a spiral of forgetting and remembering, of falling and rising. We are not the first race to stand at the edge of a choice, but we might be the first to remember what happened last time, and that makes all the difference. Maybe this is why you're here, why this story found you, not to convince, but to awaken. Because somewhere in your soul, Lemuria still sings, Atlantis still burns, and the sixth root race is waiting inside you. If this story stirred something deep within you, leave a Lemury in the comments. Do you think we've lived before? Do you feel connected to a past no one taught you? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes remembering isn't a fantasy, it's a return.